Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. To be honest, the free meal is kind of the icing on the cake in our first story. He waited 20 minutes for you guys to close out and reopen a register that wasn't even necessary because he didn't have to pay. Here we go. Okay, if you won't let me help you over here, I'll just help you over there. 1978, McDonald's, a teenage boy. A dude in his 50s. It's nearly closing time when a man in a suit and a London fog trench coat, I'm embellishing here, I don't remember crap and that kind of detail, comes in, trailing a puddle of rainwater behind him. I'm the only person working registers because it's late. You remember that part. He stands just inside the door and then walks up to the other end of the counter. I can help you over here, sir, I call out as he studies the items on the overhead menu behind the counter. He ignores me for what seems like a long time, but I'm not bothered. Lots of people aren't quite sure what they want when they come in. Plus, I get paid regardless of whether or not he can make up his mind. It's getting to be an awkward pause, so I call out again. Can I help you over here, sir? He turns to me and angrily says, "No, you can help me over here." His voice and face show that he's clearly irritated to be summoned by a pimply-faced teenager. "Why should I have to walk over to where you are? I'm the customer, not you." My manager's in the back, stripping down one grill and keeping a rack of quarter-pound meat sizzling on the other. I turn to give him a "what do I do now" look, but he just motions his head towards the a-hole, tapping his foot and waiting for me to help him over there. The thing is, this is the 1970s. We didn't have fancy things like registers where you can log in and out. We're just getting the improved model that can figure out how much change we have to give back. Having no other alternative, I walk over to the register nearest him and say, "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" in my cheeriest voice, taking the utmost care not to sound like I'm throwing politeness in his face. "I'll take a quarter-pounder meal and he says, halting halfway into the first item on his order. "Where do you think you're going?" he asks. I call out, "Just a moment, please. I have to add the meal onto your order." I literally run back to my register and push the button for the quarter-pounder meal deal. I run back. "Okay, anything else?" "Medium Coke," he drawls. I run back, press the button for that, run back again. "All right, anything else?" We do this maybe 2 more times before he figured out that I'm effing with him, and now he's pissed. "Did you see what your employee just did?" he shouts at my manager, easily identified because managers back then wore collared dress shirts and ties. My manager finishes pulling the burgers off the grill and comes around to see what's going on. "Is there something wrong, sir?" he asks, voice practically dripping with innocence. The a-hole leans over the counter. "Yeah, there's something wrong. I asked your employee to help me over here, but he's making a butt of himself, running back and forth, taking one piece of my order at a time. That's not helping me over here. He should use this register because this is where his customer is at." My manager cocks his head to the side and says, "Of course, sir. We'll take care of that right away." And then he puts his manager key on the register I was using, hits the cancel button on the order, turns the key to manager mode, and hits the magic button sequence that makes the tape spit out the amount of cash I should have on hand. "Just a moment," he calls. "I have to close this register out before I can open that one." Then pulls the cash tray out and starts counting. Not taking his time exactly, but not going as blazing fast as I know he can from watching him swap registers during lunch and dinner rushes. This takes a while, during which time the customer's getting just a teensy bit irritated. Who am I kidding? He's effing pissed. He's thrown at least 2 F-bombs by now. My manager's unperturbed. He types in the count on the register, hits some more buttons, and then turns the key to off. And then he walks over to the register nearest the customer, carrying the tray of bills as if he's going to take care of things right then and there. "Sorry for the wait, sir," he begins. The man takes a deep breath in preparation for reciting his order again, and then my manager goes, "But I'm going to have to take this cash tray back to the safe and get a fresh one out. Company policy, you know." Smiles, turns, walks away. Wouldn't you know that the a-hole actually stayed at the store until we opened the register? I think the whole process took about 20 minutes, just because he couldn't be bothered to take 5 seconds to walk over to the register closest to him. We did give him his meal for free, though, not as a reward or apology. It's just company policy to do that when a customer has a long wait, even if it's his own damn fault. This is a fantastic story. But you just know that the guy would have told everyone he knows how little common sense the people at McDonald's have, or something like that. He's clearly never worked a register, so he doesn't know the ins and outs. But he'll blame others for his ignorance. And our second story. The mess at the Egyptian Museum. My mom has always been an ancient Egypt enthusiast. I grew up surrounded by books and watching documentaries on Egyptian history and mythology. When I was 20, a friend invited me to the Egyptian Museum since she knew I have vast knowledge on the matter. The Egyptian Museum in my city is a private collection and the only one of its kind. The museum didn't have guides, and my friend didn't want to spend the afternoon just watching some antiques and reading signs. When we arrived, the museum was empty. The box office guy was the only one there. My friend paid for our tickets, and we started the visit. We were so immersed in the stories I was telling that didn't notice something was happening behind us. When I was explaining why President Nasser gifted ancient temples to foreign countries, an old lady behind us asked a question. Before I could answer, the lady said, "I'm sorry, but I find your way of explaining things really interesting. Can I join you?" My friend and I were shocked. I looked at my friend since she was the one paying, and she nodded. So we continued the visit with the old lady following us. After a while, the old lady wasn't the only one following us around the museum. When the visit was over, some of the people following us, I don't remember how many people there were, probably 10 or more, tried to pay for the visit. I declined since I wasn't a licensed tourist guide and didn't work there. Later, I learned that they were all from the same retirement home and were spending the afternoon at the museum as a field trip. They thanked me for the guided free visit and said goodbye. My friend and I were talking about how funny the situation was when a man that introduced himself as the museum curator stopped us at the entrance/exit. "You can't do that, young lady." "Do what?" I asked. "Guided visits are forbidden in the museum. We can't let anyone without formal training to go around our museum explaining stupid things to visitors." He was so condescending that I wanted to punch his face. Maybe if you offered proper guided visits, all those people wouldn't have followed me around the museum to learn more about the culture and customs in ancient Egypt. "What we offer in our museum is not your business, young lady." He was trying to look polite, but failed miserably. "What it is, however, is the prohibition of offering services outside our management." "Which services?" I replied. I was walking around explaining things to my friend when all those people started following me around. It's not my fault that what you've got to offer isn't enough. I must admit that I was being a bit, probably a lot, passive-aggressive, but that man was despicable. Maybe I raised my voice too much because one of my improvised customers turned around and yelled at the curator, "She did no harm." The old man said she was very kind and told us very interesting stories about Egypt. "That's not an excuse," the curator replied. "What she did is illegal." That sentence started a battle between the curator and the group of retirees. One of the retirees claimed to be a retired lawyer and told the curator since I hadn't received any remuneration for what I did and it was all improvised, he couldn't call the cops on me. Realizing that he was fighting a losing battle, the curator told us that we could go, but don't do it again. I'll be watching. When we walked out, I was fuming, and my friend showed the finger to the curator. The retirees were calling him names and claiming they'd never come back again. The situation was starting to slow down when the box office guy replied, "For what you have left to life." Remember him? He was the only one at the museum when we arrived, so I assumed that he was the one that called the curator. The curator told him to shut up and asked us to go since we were making too much noise at the entrance. The retirees were about to yell at him again when the old lady that approached us first said, "Why don't we treat these beautiful young ladies to some ice cream?" We weren't given the opportunity to decline since we were being dragged to the nearest ice cream shop the very moment she ended the question. We spent the rest of the evening eating ice cream and listening to stories about the youth of those lovely retirees. It was wonderful. Nowadays, the museum offers all sorts of guided visits, free and paid. I'm imagining an office in a police building. A grizzled police veteran slams down a phone and says, "Quick, everyone get to the Egyptian Museum. We have an unofficial tour group going around." And our next story. Send it to someone who cares. Can do. I work for a company that has service contracts with lots of different municipalities across the country. Essentially, we go to their town and service important equipment to make sure everything is running smoothly and things meet regulations. The department I work in is to call and email the heads of departments to have them renew their agreement so we can keep coming to service the equipment. We send a lot of reminders because some places it takes a while to get things approved and people tend to forget about the agreement. Recently, I had a gentleman, we can call him Bill, respond to one of my emails saying he doesn't need a reminder unless the contract expires. Okay, easy enough. Well, 2 days after the contract expires, I send Bill an email. He's very frustrated and asks me not to email him unless it expired. I tell him it expired 2 days earlier. We email back and forth for a bit and it becomes clear that he cannot find what he did with the contract. So I ask him if he would like me to send it to him again. He responds, "Send it to someone who cares." Okay. So I call the main line of the municipality to find out who is above Bill when it comes to decision making. They give me the email and I send it off. I get an email back very quickly asking why Bill hadn't handled this. I respond explaining I've contacted Bill a few times and he said he would handle it, but then it never got taken care of. He then asked me to forward the email chain with Bill over to him so he can take a look at it. I was so excited he asked for this. About 10 minutes later, I get a phone call from a very upset Bill asking me why I would contact his boss, and now he's in a bunch of trouble. I responded, "Bill, it was not my intention to get you in trouble, but I did what you asked. I sent the contract to someone that cares." I don't take a lot of pleasure in getting someone in trouble at work, but I did what he asked, so it really isn't my fault, right? And our last story. Now my wife is the president of the HOA. This was an issue that we had in the HOA that we used to live in when the board was taken over by a bunch of control freak nuts. First, they started issuing violation letters and fines for things that weren't prohibited. If someone requested a hearing with the board over it, they would just ignore the request or flat out deny it, which was in violation of the bylaws and state law. The typical pattern was violation letter demanding that you do whatever they wanted done within a week. If you didn't do what they wanted, then the fines would start rolling in at weekly intervals, increasing by $25 to $50 each time. Needless to say, none of this was in compliance with the CC&Rs, bylaws, and state law. Dare to complain and you'd get extra fines for anything and everything that they could dream up. Their policy was the more that people complained, the more fines that they would send out in an attempt to carpet bomb the community into submission. They hit a point where within an 8-month period, they sent out more than 10 times the amount of fines than the previous 5 years combined. To make a very long story short, they ended up turning the entire community against them, and we ultimately threw the entire board off by a recall election, which took a good $5,000 in legal fees and a considerable amount of time and effort to accomplish. To add insult to injury, my wife got elected to the new board, which undid the mess that the previous board had created. Needless to say, we no longer live in an HOA. FHOAs, never again. Well done, OP. Those power-hungry individuals abusing their positions, turning what should be a community-oriented organization into a source of frustration and discontent. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.